According to American cinema at the turn of the millennium, having a boring life, a boring job, and a boring apartment meant you had to start a revolution, either a quiet one or a
major one.
It meant you had to burn your apartment to the ground, quit your job and buy a sports car, steal money from your corporate overlords. It meant suburban life was suffocating, your entire world was fake, and you were the only one awake in a sleepwalking society. It meant carrying decades of pain beneath the surface, until one day it all came pouring out of the sky. But on the other side of the ocean, one French film dared to tell a different story, not by raising its voice, but by leaning in closer. A film that didn't start a revolution with violence or chaos, but with joy. A story where simplicity wasn't a curse, where loneliness was met with imagination, where the smallest acts of kindness could change the world. This is a video about one of the best films ever made. I wish I could tell you a story about how I saw this film in the cinema as a kid, and it changed my life forever. But unfortunately, I saw it very late. I'd always meant to watch it, but something kept putting me off. I think part of it was the poster. They took Amelie's face from that scene where she's holding a teaspoon toward the camera and photoshopped it onto this weird body. And honestly, it makes the movie look like some low-budget fantasy film. But it wasn't just the poster. I guess I simply didn't expect the movie to be as good as people said it was. So I finally watched it, and I couldn't believe what I had just seen. In my opinion, this film's perfect. It excels at basically everything. It's not just a beautiful film, it's a masterclass in storytelling. Every shot, every cut, every line of dialogue feels intentional. The writing is sharp, the direction playful, the performance is quietly brilliant. It's a story about a quirky French girl who falls in love with a pretty weird guy who collects discarded photo booth pictures, but she's too shy to make a move. Does that sound like a bad romantic comedy? Yes. Is it actually one of the best movies I've ever seen? Also yes. So forget your mafia epics, your Batman sequels, your prison break dramas, or your non-linear crime stories. By the end of this video, I'll prove to you that this quirky little French rom-com deserves to be in the same sentence as all of them, and it has aged surprisingly well. Every time a great movie gives us an iconic character, we tend to say the same thing about the actor. I can't imagine anyone else in that role. But with this film, it's genuinely true. It simply doesn't work without Audrey Tautou. It's not just good casting. She is Amélie. If I didn't know better, I'd assume the filmmakers found this quirky Parisian girl living her whimsical life and decided to make a movie about her. Could I imagine The Matrix without Keanu Reeves, for instance? The movie would feel different, sure, but I could totally picture Will Smith dodging bullets in slow motion.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
But aside from Christoph Waltz in Inglourious Bastards, I can't think of another role so inseparable from the actor playing it. Audrey is this movie. And funnily enough, she wasn't even the first choice. Director Jean-Pierre Jeunet originally wanted Emily Watson for the role, but that didn't work out because of the language barrier. And honestly, thank God. Nothing against Emily, but Audrey was born for this. She's charming but a little offbeat, beautiful but in a very real, almost odd way. She's kind-hearted and gentle, but also a little vengeful when she wants to be. That balance of innocence, mischief, and mystery. That's Amelie, and Audrey nails it. Let's look at this scene, for instance, where her neighbor is telling her about a former lover and the letters he used to write, and then asks Amelie if she also has someone.
En voyant apparaître ma belette adorée sur le quai de la gare. Vous aviez écrit des lettres comme ça, mademoiselle?
Non. Je suis la belette de personne.
This line could so easily be mistaken for a joke, or taken as sarcastic, or even passive-aggressive. But the innocence in her voice and the look on her face makes it clear she's answering honestly, and with a little regret. And it's hilarious, even though it's also setting up something really important. Amelie might be full of curiosity and mischief, but when it comes to love, she's completely inexperienced. This isn't just great casting. This is lightning in a bottle, and that's what legendary films are made of. And speaking of hilarious, I always heard great things about this film, so I knew this film wouldn't be bad. But if there's one thing I didn't expect, it's just how funny this film is. No joke, it made me laugh more than a lot of actual comedies. Like in most French films, the jokes often come out of nowhere and completely catch you off guard.
Ah non merci ma petite dame, je travaille jamais le dimanche.
It's not laugh out loud funny in a Hollywood punchline kind of way. It's dry, absurd, and just deeply, deeply French. That mix of randomness and wit just hits different. Honestly, this movie makes me regret not paying more attention in French class, because I just know that if you're fluent, the dialogue is probably 10 times better.
Vous, au moins, vous risquez pas d'être un légume, puisque même un artichaut a du cœur.
Sadly, I'm stuck with subtitles like everyone else, and I can't help but feel like a lot of the humor gets lost in translation. It's the kind of comedy that sneaks up on you and then sticks with you for days. It's this kind of subtle, chaotic humor that makes Amélie timeless. And honestly, funnier than most actual comedies. Even though this film was shot on actual film with massive cameras, no drones, no gimbals, and no easy way to get smooth footage, virtually every shot is a moving one. It's like the camera never sits still. It's always gliding, shifting, peeking around corners. There's a constant sense of motion that keeps the world feeling alive, and that was hard to do in 2001. The one negative thing I can say about the visuals, though, is that the color grading hasn't aged that well. The idea behind it is great. The colors are meant to reflect the tone of the story, warm, whimsical, slightly surreal, like a fantasy version of real life. But in 2001, extreme color grading was still in its early days, so to get that exaggerated look, they had to push the tones really hard in certain scenes. And now, yeah, some of it looks a little dated, and even the director admitted this in the DVD commentary, but the visual work goes way beyond grading. The set design is super intentional. They made sure to include at least one blue object in almost every frame, even if it had to be added digitally. And despite the fact that this is a story set in Paris, you only see the Eiffel Tower twice, far away, hidden in the background. The only other time we get a proper look at Paris is during that beautiful slow-motion shot where Amélie walks on the Pont des Arts bridge just after realizing how fulfilling it is to help people. It's a great moment, but it's not trying to sell you postcard Paris. Everything else is grounded in Montmartre, a real neighborhood, but one that feels like its own little quirky city within a city. There are no French cliches, no baguettes, and no Paris as an actual character. Just cafes, street corners, and apartments that feel lived in and specific. And if you ever do visit Paris, I highly recommend going there. The cafe where Amélie works is still there, Café de Deux Moulins, and it looks pretty much the same inside and out. I know you wouldn't just take my word for it, so I went there to show it to you. First stop, the subway station where Amélie takes the blind man. Then we go to the Café de Deux Moulins, and it's like stepping into the film because everything is pretty much the same. And the grocery store, even though it's just a small bodega on the inside, is preserved exactly like in the movie, and it's awesome to see in real life. It's full of Amélie photos and references. Everything's still there. Still glowing with the same weird charm, still carrying the film like it never ended. So yeah, Amélie's Paris, it's real, you just have to squint a little. So even if the colors look a bit dated now, the creativity and effort behind every frame makes the movie feel timeless, like you're walking through a storybook version of Paris that somehow still feels real. And the pacing of the film is very good, all things considered, with all those quirky edits and visual effects still feeling modern by today's ADHD standards. You don't just watch this film, you get pulled into it, and that's one more reason it's a visual classic. The soundtrack in this film is simple, emotional, and absolutely beautiful. And more importantly, it fits the story perfectly. It's composed by Yann Tiersen, and honestly, his music is a huge part of what gives Amélie its dreamy, nostalgic vibe. Unfortunately, I can't actually play any of it here without risking a copyright claim, and there's no real point in diving deep into the details if I can't play the actual music. So just take my word for it. It's charming without being cheesy, sentimental without being manipulative. Trust me, after watching this film, you'll be hearing it in your head for days. The interesting thing about Amélie is just how bland the story is, on paper. There's no real conflict, no urgency, no villain to defeat. It's a positive story about an introverted girl who's too shy for her own good and escapes into her imagination whenever life gets too overwhelming. Until one day she finds a lost box of childhood treasures hidden in her apartment and decides to go on a quest to return it to its owner. But even then, she's so shy, she can't just hand it to him. She hides it in a phone booth and waits from a distance to see his reaction. And when the man does finally interact with her, she barely says anything, just downs a glass of wine and watches from the sidelines. Still, that tiny act of kindness changes her. She realizes how good it feels to quietly make someone else's life better and starts doing it for everyone. And that's kind of the beauty of the whole film. The best thing about Amelie is just how positive it is. At no point is she miserable in her daily life. She's not stuck in some dead-end job that drains her soul. She's not aching for more or dreaming of escape. Quite the opposite. Her quirky cafe job and the oddball co-workers that come with it actually seem like a bonus for someone as observant and curious as she is. Amelie isn't about breaking free from a boring life. It's about finding magic in the one you already have. It's about how rewarding it is to get to know the people around you, to help them out. And honestly, I think that message is even more important now than it was back in 2001 when the film came out. We're all connected on social media, but very few people actually connect with each other in real life anymore. We work from home, we do things just so we have something to post about, and sometimes we forget what it's like to be part of a real community. Amelie's shyness kept her from interacting more with the world around her, and she knew she had to work on that. Today, though, it's like we all have Amelie's flaws, but none of her redeeming qualities, and none of her desire to change. So this simple, quirky little story about one shy girl might actually be a quiet commentary on how important real-life interaction is, and why we shouldn't lose it. And I'm not saying that was the intention of the film, that it was trying to warn us about a future where technology turns us all into shy, isolated people like Amélie at the beginning of the film. But what I am saying is that this movie has aged incredibly well. And maybe, even unintentionally, it's more relevant now than ever. No villains, no explosions, just one quiet revolution through kindness. And somehow that's more powerful than any Hollywood ending. To me, Oscars don't mean anything, at least not when it comes to judging a film's actual quality or long-term impact. The Academy Awards are basically political popularity contests, and sure, they occasionally get the nominations right, like they did with Amélie, but whether or not a film, director, or actor actually wins, completely meaningless. Best cinematography, best original screenplay, best production design, best sound mixing, and of course, best international feature film, all of those nominations made perfect sense. This film is beautiful in every way, but here's the funny part. While those nominations might be proof that the Oscars can recognize greatness, the fact that Amélie didn't win a single one of them just proves how political the whole thing really is. At the 2002 Academy Awards, there was this behind-the-scenes tension in Hollywood. People were getting tired of Harvey Weinstein's aggressive, confrontational tactics for Oscar campaigns, and rumor has it that Amélie was intentionally snubbed as a way to punish him, since his company had picked up the US distribution rights. So yeah, if you still think Oscars define greatness, remember, Amélie won nothing, and yet it won over the world. It became the highest-grossing French-language film in the world at the time, made over $170 million, and turned Montmartre into a bucket-list destination for film fans. The soundtrack became iconic, Audrey Tautou became the face of French cinema for a whole generation, and the film's visual style influenced everything from indie movies to Instagram aesthetics. Awards fade, trends change, but Amélie is still here, still loved, still magical, and that's real legacy. You know, I'm definitely not the first person to talk about how great this film is. Everyone agrees it looks and sounds amazing, that the performances are perfect, yada yada yada. But here's something not a lot of people talk about, at least not that I've seen. Amélie is an optimistic story. It's about kindness, connection, and the little joys in life. But every now and then, the film drops these moments of pragmatism, reminders that life isn't always a fairy tale. Sometimes things work out, but sometimes they don't. And no amount of wide-eyed optimism will change that. Like Beavis, the jealous guy at the cafe. Amélie sets him up with Georgette, thinking it'll be this cute little love story, but he's still the same paranoid, toxic guy he always was. The honeymoon phase ends quickly and the old patterns come right back. People don't just change overnight, especially when they're, well, insane. Or that moment near the end, when Amélie regrets not reaching out to Nino. She imagines this perfect fantasy where he's already her boyfriend, coming home to surprise her. And just as he pulls back the beaded curtain in her imagination, it moves in real life too. Is he actually there? Did her fantasy come true? It's just the cat. It's this quick cold shower moment. A reminder that daydreams don't always manifest into real life. And if she keeps waiting and hiding, she really might end up as a lonely cat lady. But then, Nino does show up. So in this case, the fantasy does become reality. Still, the film wanted to make sure we knew it wasn't guaranteed. Even the photo booth subplot, which feels like this wild, almost supernatural mystery, ends with a completely logical explanation. He wasn't a ghost or a spy or some cosmic riddle. He was just the repair guy. That's why he was in all those booths. That's why he was throwing away test photos. Case closed. And fun fact, that story was inspired by a real event. There was a guy who became obsessed with discarded photo booth pictures and tracked down a mysterious man who kept appearing in them, only to discover a completely anticlimactic truth. So yeah, even the most whimsical part of Amelie is secretly grounded in reality. Well, this film will absolutely take you on a whimsical fantasy express, but it never forgets to stop and remind you, life isn't always like this. Be kind, be hopeful, be romantic even, but don't lose your pragmatism, and don't be naive. This is a great movie with a great message, and it's beautifully made. So many films try to be great by going big, louder stories, darker themes, higher stakes. But Amelie doesn't do that. It whispers, it stays small, and somehow it ends up saying more than most films ever dare. So next time someone talks about the best films ever made, say Amelie, and don't blink. Au revoir, little weasels.